Hello, Tecumseh, you exceptional answer to what's right with the world. Welcome to the Tecumseh Bicentennial Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin J Nichols, but you can call me late for dinner. Today, we have a great lineup for you. We're going to be talking to Sara Hilton, the owner and operator of Strawberry Blue Farm. Where do you find a blue strawberry? And how did you make it blue? Is there some kind of genetic engineering involved? You know, GMOs are cool. Robert Elliott will be sharing some fascinating details about the famous Antietam photo of Abraham Lincoln taken in 1862 in our segment, A Bit o' History with Bob. That's my Scottish accent. You're welcome, because Bob Elliott is of Scottish descent. We'll also reveal the answers to Harvest Chocolate's 2 Truths and a Lie from yesterday's episode, which I gotta tell you, the reveal is pretty great. And stick around to learn about a horse of some notoriety buried right here in Tecumseh. Enough things said that had to be said. Now let's move on with the show.
My name is Sara Hilton, and I own Strawberry Blue Farm here in Tecumseh. Strawberry Blue Farm is a flower and a fiber farm. On the flower end, we offer fresh cut flowers from about late June to first frost in mid-October, whenever that frost hits. And you can find our flower stands at the Tecumseh Musgrove and Company, as well as the Matthews House. And then the other thing we do as part of the flower farm, we offer dried decor. So we have wreaths, dried flowers, napkin rings, a slew of beautiful things that we sell also through the Matthews House year-round. And then on the fiber end of the farm, we have a small flock of sheep that we have for the purpose of hand spinning and hand dyeing their wool into. And then we also purchase fiber from other small farms with missions similar to our own. We think that's a lovely way to support other small businesses. And so about maybe last week in June or so, the yarn will also be available for purchase at the Matthews House. So that is us. We are flowers and we are fiber. We do not grow blue strawberries. Actually, Strawberry Blue is a name that came out of a childhood nickname. I had strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, and I was kind of known as Strawberry Blue. So that came out of a childhood nickname. So homage to my childhood. Before Strawberry Blue Farming, I actually have a degree in English and writing, and I worked for 20 years in various aspects of the publishing industry, from publications quarter to editor, writer, and I spent probably about 5 years when we moved here working for Homefront magazine. I think, looking back, I've interviewed, been in the homes and businesses of a couple hundred residents of Tecumseh, and it was like such a privilege. I felt like it was my mission. People would put their story in my hands and I got to hold it, and then I got to tell their story, and it was such a privilege. It was what made me fall in love with this town, is meeting all these people and telling their stories. So yes, before Strawberry Blue Farming, I was in publishing for many, many years. The mission of our farm is absolutely positively based in joy. And it's also about small farming. It's about treating our animals very, very well. It's about the way that we farm is a very clean farm, in that we use our manure from our sheep into our garden. So we're not using any bad chemicals for the earth. We use things like pepper spray and nice things to keep the deer away, which sometimes I ingest and sneeze for about 14 days. But I think the mission is really treating our land and our animals really, really, really well, and kind of taking a look at the way the world was created and trying to take this small little slice of land and do something good and right and kind. I would say there are 2 distinct things. One would be how I grew up. The town where I grew up makes Tecumseh look like the big city. I grew up in a one-horse farm town.
You grew up in Tipton.
Like Tipton, right? Like, there's nothing. And the center of my universe, the center of my world, was my grandparents' farm. All of our lives revolved around the farm. My childhood was spent on the farm. And I think I knew from a very early age that I absolutely loved it. I loved the landscape. I loved the rhythms of the farm. And I loved the work on a farm. I think, there's very little idleness on a farm, but it was such a gift to learn at an early age that there is deep satisfaction and joy in hard work. And I loved farm work. And I also think, I was recently talking to someone who grew up in LA, and we were comparing notes from our childhoods, which we had these vastly different experiences. And she said to me something like, "Oh my goodness, you must have been so bored out in the middle of nowhere." And I thought, oh my goodness, no, that's crazy, because as a kid on a farm, you are free. And the corn crib is your castle. The barn is your battleship. It's just a place where imagination and creativity blossoms. And so while that childhood, looking at what I do now, gave me so much practical information and knowledge on how to raise animals, how to grow things, I think one of the biggest gifts in that was that it gave me a compass point, if you will, to know this is the work, this is the landscape, this is the life that is joy to me. That in itself is a tremendous gift. So that's one, joy. And then the other end of that is not joy, it's actually pain. I have some medical conditions that cause me to often experience extraordinary debilitating pain. So I would say for the last 25 years maybe, I think it's safe to say I spend about a quarter of my time in bed. I'm unable to get out of bed. And I spent many, many years of my life chasing the cure, thinking, oh my goodness, hope, it's right around the corner. I'll just try one more thing. I saw doctor after doctor. I saw some of the best doctors in the country. I tried every alternative thing you can imagine. I did experimental things. I'm like, oh, I'll be the lab rat. It just fix me. Until I think a couple of years ago, I was so incredibly tired. Like to my bones tired. And I think it was a moment where I thought, I'm not going to get better. This actually is life. This is my life. And for a hot second, I think I just oscillated back and forth between despair. Like, I have to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And then flat out anger. And the anger was really pronounced when I compared myself to other people at that point, which is always a bad thing to do. Don't do that. Where I'd look at other people and I'd think, it's not fair. You have all this time. You have no idea what health is, and you just take it for granted. And I'm just like mad. So I'm sitting in this little mud puddle of despair and anger. And I think very quickly realized that mud puddle, I'm going to become this gross, bitter person. So I think it was time for me, I knew it was time for me to make a tone change, to be like, okay, instead of saying, everybody has more time, it's not fair, say, okay, I don't get as much time to live as the majority of people. So what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to use my life in the time that I have? And in part, the answer to that was Strawberry Blue Farm. And again, I'm so grateful to have had that compass point. I knew where to go home to, if you will. And it has given me, Strawberry Blue Farm has given me just such tremendous joy. Even in the times when I'm broken in bed, my spirit isn't broken, my mind isn't broken, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this, and I bet I can do this. And it gives me reason to get out of bed. And I think I had a tone change in pain. I still don't know if I'd say, I wouldn't change it. I love it, right? But looking at pain as like, instead of, it's not fair, it robs so much of my life, saying, okay, actually it distilled my life a bit. I don't have that time. So now I'm kind of distilled down to having to shove other things aside and saying, this is important. And for me, that lifestyle is important. Joy is important. Spreading that joy, flinging that joy from the farm out into my community is important. So the formative things in my life, right, are joy and pain. And from that, we got Strawberry Blue.
What inspires you personally?
I think that's easy. For me, it's creation. I walk outside and I just finished this book, and the author was talking about the Dutch masters, the painters, right? And the author's like, look for this and look for this, because they're trying to tell you something. They're expressing something to you. So pay attention when you look at these paintings. And so often I think we miss the extraordinary thing that we walk out into daily, into God saying, hey, I'm expressing something to you. And we see beauty and abundance and the intricacies and the mystery of it. And I think through my job, I'm outside every single day. I'm interacting with it every single day. And then through that, I learn even more. Like when I plant my garden every spring, I stand there and I'm like, dollars to donuts, this is going to fail. This is stupid. I must be an idiot. I have this field of dirt and you're telling me I put these seeds in there. And some of the flower seeds I have are like specks of dust, right? And it's silly.
Snapdragons.
Yes, like that little tiny, and you're like, this is ridiculous. I feel like it's a scam. I feel like there are people hiding behind the trees being like, she's so gullible. This is just like so stupid. But year after year, a few months later, it's like abundance. And it's one of those moments, again, of interacting with nature, which gives me peace, because I think, like, what is God expressing here? And when I do my garden, I think, okay, I have to show up. I prep the soil, I put my seed in, I water it, but then underneath that surface, all those places I can't see, there are miracles happening. There's growth. I don't have to do everything. It's not all on me. And that's just, it's such a relief. So 100%, it's going outside. Nothing is more inspirational. I recommend it to the entire world. Go outside. Put your phone down and go outside.
You reminded me of this poem. It's so very short. Two men looked out from prison bars. One saw mud, the other stars. He was a thoroughbred stallion, over 15 hands high, a bay with black socks and his tail held high. He was fast, he was furious, one blink, and he was gone. A famous racing horse known as Don Juan. Don Juan. Yep, his name was Don Juan. Don Juan. Some folks say he wanted to be a racehorse his whole life because he wanted to be the fastest one on the track. He was a fast one. Well, on April 25th, 1865, some Union cavalry suddenly arrived. Don Juan's groomer, Junius Garland, thought that it would be better to keep himself alive. Well, that's Don Juan, he heard the soldiers say. We've been out here looking for him for the past several days. Thanks for taking care of him. You've done a great job. We're going to take him off your hands and then be on our way. Don Juan. They stole Don Juan. Don Juan. Seems like he was wanted. Don Juan. Soldiers took Juan and were gone. Don Juan. They gave him, though, someone special. General Custer, wartime champion, legendary horseman and all-around hero, rode Don Juan in a parade through Washington, the capital, not the state. Skittish and restive, Don Juan wasn't meant for parades, and he lost his mind when a tender young maid threw a wreath of flowers to ring around his neck. Don Juan bolted, took off at a breakneck pace. Custer lost control of Don Juan, right there in front of Andrew Johnson's son. His name was Don Juan. Like a shot, he was gone. Custer had to struggle to stay on. Don Juan. Custer's hat flew off of his flowing locks, and his sword, it clattered down onto the street. He fought for control of Don Juan with his left hand, and in his right hand he still held that stupid wreath. Here's where it gets exciting, so make sure you're paying attention. In a feat of expert equitation, without qualm or hesitation, Custer gave an answer to the question in the situation: who would be the victor of this testosteronic altercation? Custer's valiant domination brought his mount to subjugation. That means Custer won. At least that's what Don Juan let Custer think. He wasn't stupid. He heard about Custer shooting his last horse by accident while he was hunting buffalo. Fun fact, General Custer was a terrible shot. Another fun fact, equitation's a real word. It's the art and practice of horsemanship and horse riding. One more fun fact, testosteronic's a real word too. It's an adjective, means relating to testosterone. Don Juan. His name was Don Juan. Don Juan. He was full of testosterone. He knew which side his bread was buttered on. He wasn't dumb, he was a smart one. Well, rumor has it 1 year later, Don Juan died of a burst blood vessel hiding deep inside, but that seems to me to be an unfitting way to tell the story of a horse who was so legendary that he found his way into our hearts and also our history. So we fondly remember the alternate take. You know, the 10-year one? Here it goes. Don Juan retired and he spent a decade living out his life to be a stud to carry on his legacy until one day he finally found a better plain to graze upon and fell asleep, and now he rests so peacefully in Tecumseh beneath a stone that bears his name, and like a summer vapor he was here one day and then was gone, and that's the way we end the tale about a legend like Don Juan. See, that means Don Juan died, but whether you pick the 10-year version or the 1-year version doesn't change the fact he died in Tecumseh. Don Juan. We have a rock. Don Juan. It's got his name on it. Don Juan. His name was Don Juan. Don Juan. One moment here and then he was gone. Still his legend lives on. General Custer's favorite horse, Don Juan. Okay, this is one of my favorite parts. Let's play Two Truths and a Lie.
I love that. Yes.
3 things presented as facts about Strawberry Blue Farm or about Sara Hilton or whatever.
Yeah.
3 of them, and 2 of them are true. 1 of them's a lie. We got to figure it out.
You're a liar.
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
All right, you crazy kids, it's time for that super swell game, 2 truths and a lie. You're given 3 facts, 2 of them are true, 1 of them is lie. Spot the lie, vote online. We'll let you know what the answer is tomorrow.
What is the truth?
You can't handle the truth. Everybody cheer. It's time to play 2 truths and a lie.
Tell me the truth.
Okay, so I think that we should talk about animals because we have a lot of animals on the farm. Story number 1. We had a chicken named Tim McGraw. And Tim McGraw, the chicken, was in Tim McGraw's mind. Tim McGraw was certain Tim McGraw was a person. So Tim McGraw would run away from the flock to hang out with us. He'd have dinner with us. He'd sit on my chair with me. I loved Tim McGraw. And then we were like, I wonder if you can train a chicken the way you train a dog. And if you've ever thought that, I mean, I'm sure you've thought that question. You've asked that
Obviously.
question. Yeah. The answer is
Who doesn't? What?
You can.
You can?
Yes. We trained Tim McGraw to jump, and he loved crackers. So we'd jump Tim McGraw, and then we'd talk. Tim McGraw was the coolest chicken ever to live. But the fact, because Tim McGraw didn't stay with the flock, because he thought he was a person.
Sure.
One morning a coyote came out of the corn, and it was lights out for
Tim is gone.
Tim is gone, but he's in our hearts forever. Right.
He's in my heart now, too.
I know.
Okay, so that's 1.
That's 1.
I really want that one to be true, but carry on.
Okay. 2, one night I went out in the barn on the chicken thread to close up the barn for the night, and the chickens were all going crazy. So I go into the coop, and all the way in, I turn around, and there's an opossum there, and now I'm cornered. They hiss, and they have little rat tails. They're terrible. So he's hissing, and I'm like, okay, I need to be the chicken hero here because I can't lock him in the coop all night, right? So in the process of getting him out and saving the world from the opossum, I impaled my hand on a little piece of chicken wire. No big deal. I go to bed. I wake up in the middle of the night. I save the chickens. I'm a hero. And my hand, I wake up to extraordinary pain. And I kind of don't really sleep all night. And I get up first light, and my hand is all swollen and creepy. And I think, well, that's weird, and that's probably not good. So that's new. That wasn't there yesterday. So I thought, well, I'll call the doctor. And the nurse that I talked to was like, oh my gosh, you have to go to urgent care. And I thought, we're being a little dramatic, don't you think? So I had a cup of coffee and just that's eggs. It's breakfast on the farm. That's silly. So I kind of eased my way to urgent care. And then they were all in a flutter. And they said that this was the type of thing where the infection spreads so bad that people amputate. So I like a slew of antibiotics and all that. But I thought, like, what a bummer if I'm going to have my hand amputated. The story is I was saving chickens. So
What a bummer to lose your hand for chickens.
I know, right? Yeah. Maybe a child, but like a chicken, right?
You would just have to, I think, adjust the story.
Yeah, I would lie. That's a good reason to lie.
Just lie.
Just lie.
So then number 3.
Okay, number 3. A few years ago, we got some goats because our pasture was covered in poison ivy, and goats are like, this is delicious. We'll eat it. So we got some goats. But goats are these amazing escape artists, right? If there's anything in the fence they can get through, they'll get through it. So the first few weeks, we'd see a goat walking around and we'd find it and shore up the fence. So one day I'm upstairs putting away laundry. I'm home alone and I hear a crash in the kitchen. And I'm like, that's odd. So I look out and the cars are gone. I'm home alone. And I know for a fact someone's down there. And the only way out is down the steps, which into being murdered, obviously. So I don't want to do that. So I took my phone and went into the bathroom and locked the door, which, I don't know, at least gave me a second. And I had 911 ready to go. And I'm doing that thing in your mind where you're like, should I call? Should I call? Should I call? So we have wooden steps. And I hear, brump, brump, brump. And I'm like, I'm going to call. So I hit that button. I call. And they're like, what's your name? I'm like, there's someone in my house. And then right after that, I hear, meh. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my goat. And the lady's like, excuse me, ma'am. I'm like, I'm so embarrassed. So I had to talk them off the ledge that, I wasn't being murdered. So I opened my door and that was Nedward, his name, Ned. Before that, I had been carrying in wood from the wood barn. And I had the door propped open as I went back and forth. And Nedward must have just been wandering around the house. So,
well, what do you think, Tecumseh? Which one is the lie? Is it Tim McGraw, the chicken that does tricks for treats? Is it the unfriendly chicken wire that tried to take off Sarah's hand? Or is it Nedward, the murder goat? You can vote on Spotify or at sdgcreative.net/TB podcast and click on the June 24 Strawberry Blue Farm link. We will reveal the answer in tomorrow's episode. Anyway, yesterday, you said feeding Elton John was the lie. Let's hear the answer.
Tell us which one is the lie.
It wasn't Elton John, it was Eddie Vedder. I cooked food for Eddie Vedder while he played an acoustic set privately in LA. Bill Clinton was there too, as well as Ben Affleck, and I forget who else.
Well done, Tecumseh. You were exactly correct. I award you with 200 podcast points, which are redeemable for one crisp high five from yours truly upon our next encounter. I'm so proud of you. Moving on. Truths and a lie.
We've really pivoted over the last year. We actually started doing farmers markets. And then about a year ago, we were approached by the Matthews House Shop downtown Tecumseh, who invited us to be part of their store and sell our items via retail. And they changed our life. We have so much gratitude for that because given some of my health limitations, it's just a perfect solution for us. So my goal, my dream, what we're moving toward is finding a few more locations outside of Tecumseh to replicate that retail model. And that gives us some really nice sustainable growth. And then the second part is always the foundation I talked about earlier of joy. Strawberry Blue Farm cannot exist without that. And over the last few years, we've been able to do some really great community events, finding ways to love our community. The last few years, we've done something called Coffee and Knit with Musgrove and Company. And the purpose of that function is to, one, bring together a community of people, to build lasting relationships, because particularly coming out of the pandemic, people were so alone and lonely, and given our phones and given the way we interact, that face-to-face thing is so good for us, and it doesn't happen. So the first goal was to do that. And then the second thing through what we did through Coffee and Knit is, okay, we have this group of people who are really passionate about knitting or crocheting and making. And we have all these organizations that need knitted items, right? Tecumseh Service Club, hats and mittens for kids. Hospice of Lenawee needs blankets and socks, right? So we worked out a system where we could give knitters in the community a way to use their gifts and talents and passion to actually help and make a difference in the community, right? Because so often I think we think the only way to help is to sacrifice ourselves and have no joy. And if we're miserable, then we're doing good. And that's not true. So finding ways to kind of perpetuate, I always say we're joy flingers. We want to fling joy out of the farm and help people to fling joy themselves. So the vision, really, ideal vision, is one, to have some sustainable expansion, right? To get our company growing a little bit more. But then I'll never forget really the basis of why I did all this. And that is service and joy. So that is my ideal vision.
What superpower would be most useful in running Strawberry Blue Farm?
Yeah, so thinking through the superheroes and friends that I know, I think I was going to say Hulk Hogan, but that's a wrestler.
I mean,
so
you can totally be a superhero.
I don't want to be a professional
guy.
wrestler. Oh, that'd be cool. I think the Incredible Hulk, minus the anger issues, because
he's got some rage problems.
Yeah, I don't want the rage or anger. That's probably not fitting with the joy aspect of it.
Sure.
But there are so many times that I get so frustrated because there are things that I need to do. Like, for instance, I have to trim the sheep's hooves. Things that they're like, we'd prefer you just didn't do this, and they don't like it. And these sheep, some of my sheep weigh more than I do. So wrestling them down, and it would be nice if I could just be really big for a second, so they'd be like kittens or lap dogs. I could just flip them over and do what I need to do, and, loading hay and straw and buckets, and I would just like to have incredible size and strength.
Okay.
That'd be amazing.
You know what?
Yeah.
I agree.
Or be a WWF wrestler. That'd be cool too.
I like that.
Yeah, One of the cool things that I just am fascinated with is our home was built in 1832. So you go in the basement and you look up, and our beams are these hand-hewn beams with bark on it. It's so cool. And so a few months after we moved to Tecumseh, I found this book in an antique store, and it had a description of all the early settlers. And it was like 1880, I think the book was published. And the guy who built my house was in there, and there was this little thing about him. And it talks about how the vast wilderness between Monroe and Tecumseh, there's nothing. And this dude builds a house that my house is close to its bicentennial, right? It's just a hot second after Tecumseh. So the fact that this guy did this out of nothing, I can't fix one thing in my house without going to Martin's or Tecumseh plywood, right? He didn't have that. And so when I consider what was here, the vast wilderness, and I think we take for granted these early settlers and what they created, and the creativity and the knowledge that took, and the guts it took to live like that and build this out of nothing. It's extraordinary to me.
When contemplating events in the grand scheme of things, small towns are often mentioned only in passing, usually as the birthplace of somebody who is famous. It's like, oh, he came from this town, and then he went on and he changed the world. And that's the only thing you ever hear about that town. And that's okay, because, a town is a town and not a person, except I kind of feel sometimes like Tecumseh might be a person. But from a purely statistical perspective, the odds are slim that any small town is going to repeatedly contribute to significant historical events. But it seems, the further I dig into this, the further I go, it seems that Tecumseh is a glorious exception. Despite having a population consistently of less than 10,000, Tecumseh, Michigan has made remarkable impacts on both national and international stages. One of the things that we're exploring not only in this podcast, but also in the live show at the TCA, but also in the live show at the TCA on July 21st, which you're going to come to July 21st at 3 p.m., the WTCA radio show live on stage. It's going to be awesome. But in today's installment, of Bit O' History with Bob, Bob Elliott discusses the famous Antietam photo from 1862, featuring Abraham Lincoln and his officers, including Tecumseh's own Captain George Monteith. A labeled copy of the photo is included in the show notes for today's episode at sdgcreative.net/TB podcast, and then just click on today's episode, which is the Strawberry Blue Farm episode. So you can see exactly who Bob is referring to as he talks. Although don't look up the photo while you're driving. If you're driving while you're listening to this, just wait until you park. Okay.
Abraham Lincoln wants the army up and moving. He wants the war to end. It's a costly war in lives and financing and everything. So he's down telling General McClellan, this little general guy, to get the army up and moving. Most historians believe that McClellan brought this chair out for Lincoln to sit in the chair, so he would be looking down in this famous photo, and Lincoln says, "No, I'll stand." So who do you see in the photo? You see Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. So it's a great photo, and trying to get McClellan the army up and moving. They called him the young Napoleon. He's just sitting on his heels. He's kind of a scaredy cat, I think, sometimes, but he wires Lincoln shortly after and says, "Mr. President, we've just encountered an enemy cow to our front. What do you wish me to do with him?" And Lincoln says, "Milk him." He keeps Lincoln in his parlor for like 45 minutes in his house in D.C. one time, so they don't get along at all. He runs against Lincoln for president in 1864 and loses. All these famous generals in here. Webb was an amazing general at Gettysburg, the Second Corps general. There's George Custer, 23-year-old George Custer, in there, last in his class at West Point, that led the Tecumseh guys in the Wolverine Brigade at Gettysburg.
Heard a thing about his horse.
In town, Don Juan, he had like 6 horses shot out from underneath him during the war, but Don Juan's buried here. Yeah, so Don Juan, he kind of liberated. He rode it through the promenade. He actually rode it in the Illinois County Fair, brought his sister and rode it in the fair. But this guy right here in the back here, it's tough to see this guy. He's adjutant. He's one of these general's aides here. His name is George Monteith. He's a captain in the Tecumseh Volunteers from Tecumseh here. His father was one of the founding members of the University of Michigan. He was the first president of the University of Michigan. He is a pastor at the University of Michigan.
Starting a business here, the thing that has been so awesome is the collaboration and the cooperation and the generosity of the community, the way the business owners work together, the way the community is so generous in their support in small businesses, the way that it's so shocking the way everybody's rooting for you to succeed and giving of their own business to help you succeed. That is so rare and so special. And I think it is in part the reason that Tecumseh didn't fall the way of many small towns, just boarded up and gone. And if I had, my hopes and dreams would be that continue. And my simple message, words of wisdom and advice would be 100 years from now to remember where you came from, remember the spirit that built this town, and to continue in that way. It's who we are, so it's extraordinary.
Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode. I hope you thought it was good. I hope you thought it was fun. And I hope you're ready tomorrow for another one. Dr. Seuss, watch out. Okay.